And so it was not what I expected at all, and very overwhelming.
And that
obviously.
bar, like any thoughts you might have had about detachment, whatever, are just completely gone.
Yeah.
And you suddenly have a new human, and they're there and they're screaming. In fact, they usually calm down a bit.
Yeah, she did calm down.
You know, because they feed off your.
Lucy being Lucy, she was still a bit grumpy even when she was laid there. She was telling me who was boss even then. Yeah.
But so we now have. Now, there's one thing we haven't talked about. We've got to the point where Lucy is in the world. But where did the name come from, and when did you decide?
It was quite early on, actually. So when we got the I can't remember if we discussed this before, but when we got the diagnosis results over the phone, we then went in the following week to meet our consultant, who happened to be, we hadn't met, I'd met Gareth Waring because he'd done my amnio or whatever it was,
yes,
to get the diagnosis. So I had met him, but John hadn't met him. But we went in to meet him and have our first scan with him. But before the scan, the nurse came in with the results from the Life Centre in like a little folder, and she said, "This folder does have the sex of your baby. Do you want to know the sex of your baby?" And we were like, and we looked at each other because we hadn't discussed that really.
Right.
But I think we both instinctively said yes. Because, as I've talked about before, having seen her on a few scans even at this point, even at like 20 weeks or whatever we were at this point, we'd seen her, quite a lot of her. So, yes, we did want to know. So we knew it was a little girl at that point. And again, I can't help myself. I've got such a kind of planning brain.
Yes, I know this to be true. I know this to be true, Laura.
I
know it.
Yes, I can't help myself. I needed to start planning what the baby was going to be called at that point.
Right.
And whether John liked it or not, we were discussing names. After that scan, I remember we went to the Hard Rock Cafe.
And what were the big hitters before we got to Lucy? What were the big hitters?
So her middle name is Amelia, and I wanted to call her Amelia.
Right.
And I think John had a different name as well. I can't remember what that was now. But what we discussed at that, I mean, we were always so pragmatic. At that meal, we discussed we knew we wanted a name that you couldn't shorten.
Right.
Because we both have names that aren't really shortened, and we wanted that to continue. And so your name is your name kind of thing. Even though people do shorten Laura, and they do sometimes to Law, and Lucy does sometimes get Lou, but generally it is the name is the name. And so we discussed that, and we discussed the fact that we knew that people with Down syndrome can struggle to learn to talk.
Right.
They can struggle with speech impediments and things, depending on the weakness of the muscles in the jaw and the tongue and all of that kind of stuff. We were taking all of that into account, would you believe?
Wow.
Which a lot of people are like, you can't have done that. But we did. We genuinely were worried.
Knowing you,
exactly.
I know this is you.
Yeah.
This is absolutely you.
I had to think it through, and it had to be right for the baby to for the child to be able to say their name and stuff. Actually, looking back, the name Lucy was something that. So I was inspired by the Peanuts cartoon,
right?
Because I grew up. My dad was a graphic designer, and one of the first things he taught me to draw was Snoopy. It was a very simple drawing that he taught me to do, because I was always like, I can't draw like you. It's not fair, and da-da-da. And he said, so he drew a Snoopy and then showed me how he did it, and then got me to do it, and it was exactly the same. And I was like, I can draw like you. So it's obviously like a thing to sort of build my confidence, because I was struggling. And we'd always watch Snoopy cartoons together and things, and I always loved the character Lucy. I thought she was hilarious. And John was a bit the same, really. He'd always enjoyed it. So when we started to sort of, wherever that came from, I think we didn't use books, but I think we went online and maybe looked at a few lists and stuff. Right. And kind of the lovely thing nowadays is you don't have to get a massive big book. You can just say, ask ChatGPT or ask Google, what for, because we knew it needed to be quite a short name. So we're like 4 or 5 letter names and for girls and da-di-da-di-da. And I think Lucy was in a list, and I think Amelia was in a list, and there was another name in the list, and we got a list of 10 down to like 5 and then down to 3. And then we decided we both felt this connection to the character Lucy.
Wow.
Because we knew we needed a fighter and somebody, a feisty kid that was going to, rule the roost as she does. Because
But with your genetics, I know this is going to be happening. I'm seeing it happening already. Knowing Lucy, I can see it forming.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it made sense to both of us. So that's where the name came from.
So, born on August 25th, 2021, was Lucy.
Yes.
Wow. Now then, we now have a baby, and then we have a whole lot more to come, which is all to do with the complications we talked about before and how they'll get resolved. And we'll find that out in the next episode, I think, which will be episode 5 of
Tea and 21 with Laura Sharpe.
See you next time.
See you then.